Hey X, I have a story that I really need to get off my chest. It's something that I spend hours and hours going over in my head every day, and every time I think about it, I get even more freaked out by each and every detail. It's not an easy one to tell, but I will try my best in the hopes that it will make me feel lighter, and maybe you Anons can chime in with your stories too. It's about Yellowstone National Park. To sum it up and keep it short, we found an unmapped and unexplored cave system there, and it is somewhere I will never go back. No one should ever go near it. I will Greentext from here. My boyfriend Alex was the person to tell me about this unexplored cave system. How he found out about it, I have no clue, but he was insistent that I go with him to explore it. I regretted agreeing to go with him the instant we made it there. I was planning on breaking up with him, but figured I'd give him one last good memory, since he was so desperate for me to go with him. I think we both knew it was coming to an end, but I was the one who had to call it quits. We were in this cave, crawling on all fours, with our stomachs almost pressed to the ground. The tunnel was extremely tight. I had a helmet on, and it was scraping incredibly loud against the ceiling. Seemed like the passage was becoming narrower and narrower the further we went in. I couldn't even take a deep breath, it became so tight. I yelled for Alex and asked if he could hear me, but I did not get a response. Weird. He was only a few minutes ahead of me at most. There wasn't even enough space for me to pivot and turn my body around, so I couldn't go backwards even if I wanted to. The only way back would be to push myself backwards through the passage, which means I wouldn't be able to see what's behind me at all. I had to pause and concentrate on not freaking out. I kept taking deep breaths again and again, because having a panic attack in this place was the last thing I needed. All I needed to do was keep going, and then I would see Alex, and everything would be okay. After a few minutes of crawling, the tunnel opened up into a chamber that was low but wide. I just simply laid on my back for a few minutes, trying to suck in as much air as I possibly could. I was so relieved to have made it through. While I was on my back, I noticed there was a ton of stalactites hanging overhead, and that there was a lot of flowstones on the walls. I heard Alex shout for me all of a sudden. His voice immediately filled me with relief and a feeling of safety. He told me he found a shaft that must have been at least 200 feet. His shout sounded like he was a decent distance away. I finally managed to push myself up off of the floor and made my way over to where he was. He was crouched down next to a hole in the middle of the chamber. The hole was a wall of blackness. He was already preparing to go straight down it without a moment of thought. He already had his harness on and was pulling rope from his backpack. I was worried at this point and didn't really want to go any further. I told him that maybe it wasn't such a good idea to go any deeper, considering the place had not been mapped out. But he just laughed it off, and basically told me to shut up and stop worrying. I tried again with him, trying my best to let him know that I did not want to go any further. I told him about not having enough water, that we might get lost and never be found, or one of us might have an accident and not be able to get help. No response. He was too focused on what he was doing. I just glared right at him. This is exactly why I was done with him. My opinions were never worthy of his time, and every time I ever had any sort of worry or complaint, he'd say it was just my anxiety and wave it away. He never ever took me seriously. I had no choice in the matter at this point. I didn't want to crawl back through that tunnel alone and try and make my way out without any help. I gave in, and we started to descend. I just had to get through one more trip. I have to admit, between the anxiety and the fear, I definitely felt a small sense of intrigue. We were barely halfway down, and we had seen multiple other openings that led to who knows where. Maybe other unexplored caverns and shafts. The cave was so big, it made me puzzled as to how it was still unexplored after all of this time. We finally reached the bottom. I unclipped myself and slid down the last bit of the way. I turned on my flashlight. We were standing in a massive cavern. I couldn't see the edges of the place, it was so big. My flashlight barely had any impact and struggled to illuminate anything around us. The place looked big enough to have its own city or civilization. People could live down here and no one would ever know. Alex was clearly very happy with himself and told me he wished he could stay here forever. He absolutely loved exploring caves and getting himself into tight spaces. I thought it was a bit insane, especially when I first met him. I didn't understand how anyone could find this type of thing fun. I still thought it was insane now, but I guess I was starting to understand why he found it so fascinating. His enthusiasm just kind of rubbed off on me, I guess. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a glow stick. He snapped it and placed it onto the floor in front of us. He said he wanted to map out as much of the place as possible and was going to use these glow sticks as markers. He charged ahead of me, but I did not rush after him. I needed to take my time as much as possible. I imagined myself running and falling off a sudden sheer cliff, and that is the last thing I wanted to happen. I was not going to be taking any risks. I noticed that we hadn't encountered any insects or anything in the system so far. No little bugs crawling on the walls or ants on the ground. The place seemed pretty lifeless and forgotten to time. The cavern eventually led us to a diverging path with a choice of 3 tunnels. This is where I caught up to Alex. One of them was way too small for us to fit, even smaller than the one we had crawled through earlier. The other 2 seemed pretty much the same, aside from one having a bit of a slope. I asked Alex which way we should go, before we heard something horrible. It was a shrieking sound that rang through the air. Sounds like it came from the tunnel on the far left. It sounded so inhuman. It was like nothing I had ever heard before. I yelled out to him, asking what the hell that sound was, but he just shrugged his shoulders. I told him that we needed to leave right this second, but he was not budging. The shrieks just kept coming, again and again. They sounded like they were getting closer. They were accompanied by some strange hissing noise that followed right behind them. I told Alex to hurry up and that we were leaving right now. I was yanking at his arm with as much might as I could muster. Finally, he decided to start running. We rushed down the tunnel on the far right-hand side, which branched off into a maze of different passageways. I was way too panicked to keep track of which paths we were taking, and just rushed through the first one that I could see as fast as possible. Some of the passages led to dead ends, so we occasionally had to sprint back and take the next passage closest to us. The thing did not let up, no matter how fast we ran. It stayed hot on our trail the entire time. Its shrieks were louder than our own breathing and the beat of my heart, and it's clear that it was catching up to us. I was starting to tire quickly, and I knew I couldn't keep up the running for much longer. My legs were about to fail. There was no other option left for us. We had to hide from it and wait for it to pass or lose track of us. I grabbed at and shoved Alex to get his attention and pointed frantically at an opening I saw nearby. It was something like a small fissure, and I had to curl myself up into a ball just to be able to fit properly. Alex jumped in after me and dropped his headlamp to the ground while doing so. It fell to the floor hard and shattered completely. Our only source of light was gone. We were trapped helplessly in the darkness. I pushed as deep into the fissure as I could until I could no longer move. At some point, I don't know how much time exactly had passed, but the shrieks of whatever it was had stopped. I hoped and prayed so hard that it had left already. Suddenly, the thing rushed past us. Even with me being stuck deep into the fissure, I could feel the air being moved in the passage as it shot by like a bullet. It must have brushed against something, as it caused a cluster of rocks to fall and hit the ground. Alex let out a raspy sigh. I managed to raise my arm up enough to be able to turn on my own headlamp. I didn't have my flashlight anymore. I must have dropped it while I was running for my life. We had a little bit of light at least, even if it wasn't much. I could barely see anything. Alex's body was blocking most of my line of sight. I asked him if he could see anything at all, and he told me no. His breath was shaky as he began to tell me he left all of our supplies. Everything. Our first aid kit, our spare flashlights, our food supplies, and the candles that we brought. They were all still inside the backpack that he dropped. Fuck. Not only was that thing still out there, but we didn't remember the way back. He said that we should look around for any sign that we could to follow back, like handprints or footsteps we might have left. I didn't have any better ideas. He started squirming back out of the fissure, and my heart sank. I couldn't get out. I was fucking stuck in here. I tried to slide out, but I couldn't budge an inch. The way I had contorted myself to fit deep inside here meant that I couldn't maneuver my body, and pushing forward had no effect. I was really starting to panic, and I was begging for him to help me out of here. If I stayed in here a second longer, the anxiety was going to make me explode. He told me to calm down, and that he was going to try and pull me out. He told me to push at the same time as he was pulling. I felt pathetic, but at this point, I just wanted to be out of here. I told him I was ready. After a couple of minutes, he dropped my hand suddenly. He told me to give him the headlamp. I asked him what was wrong. He told me to just shut up and give him the headlamp. I told him no fucking way, not until you tell me what the fuck is going on. He just gave me a blank stare, 1,000-yard stare. Tears started to well up in his eyes, and he told me he was sorry, and that there was nothing else he could do. He reached out and tore the headlamp off my head, telling me he would try his best to come back for me in an effort to soothe me. I tried to fight back and hit him, but it was no use. I could only move one of my arms freely as the other was contorted and stuck, and one wasn't enough force to stop him. I screamed. I begged. I pleaded for him to not leave me. I grabbed his wrist, but he just shook it off and refused to look at me. He walked away and took the only source of light left with him. All I could do was listen to his footsteps fading away as I sat here, preparing to die. I was distraught, and then I quickly became furious. He was probably going to lie about leaving me down here, and make up some tragic heroic story for himself, the fucking coward. I told myself I wasn't just going to die like this. I repeated it in my head over and over again like a mantra. I took deep breaths and started my attempt at loosening myself from the hole I was stuck in. I recall reading some advice on an old forum about what to do if you ever get stuck in a tight space in a cave. I had to wriggle, and if I got stuck, I needed to exhale and then try to move again slowly. Just keep chipping away. It took a long time, and by the end I was drenched in sweat. I kept making little amounts of progress, inch by inch, but it took me a long time. When I finally slid out and fell to the ground, I could not tell you just how relieved I felt at that moment. My skin was flaking at this point from the friction of sliding my skin against the jagged walls, but I did not care anymore. I was shivering when I finally got out. I had some big problems though. No light, no food, and only a small amount of water left in my bottle. I also had no way to stay warm without the candle that we'd left in the backpack. I could not see anything whatsoever. My eyes were never going to adjust. I had to focus my hearing and try to use it to the best of my ability, as that was my only hope of finding my way back. I listened intently for any rustle at all, and suddenly felt the pressure of wind against my face. I turned around to try and locate where it was coming from. This was my only hope. It either leads me out of the cave, or I die here. No one would know that we were missing until at least tomorrow night, so any hope of a rescue with that thing skulking around was out of the question. I picked the direction that it seemed like the wind was coming from and crawled forward blindly. I was so anxious, I thought my legs would give out, so I opted to crawl instead. I could be a little quieter this way too. I had to focus as hard as I could on the air pressure. I had to stop and move backwards multiple times just to be sure I was going the right way. progress was incredibly slow. I decided to pile up some rocks as I made my way further in order to at least have some kind of marker to help me if I needed to get back. The breeze was becoming stronger. I was heading the right way. I wanted to sprint towards it so badly, but I knew that would be stupid. And then I saw it. Some kind of light ahead of me. It must be daylight. My heart shattered as I moved closer and found that it was not daylight. It was a beam of electrical light that was fixed and unmoving. I kept up my crawling pace as my surroundings were still too dark to fully make out, and I didn't want to take any chances at all. I must have been making my way through another large cavern. The ground was really uneven, and I kept feeling my hands stabbing into small rocks on the ground. I got closer to the light. There was someone sitting against the wall, completely still. It was Alex. His face was pale and sweaty. He was definitely alive. I could see him breathing ever so faintly. I was torn between rage and pity. He brought this on himself though. I yanked the headlamp off of his helmet and I began to wipe it down. It was weirdly sticky. I secured the headlamp to myself and tilted my head in order to see him more clearly. What I saw made me scream. He had a cluster of cream-colored sacks all over his body. Each sack was about the size of a human hand, and they were shiny as well as semi-transparent. There was a sack bulging over his stomach that I could not take my eyes off of. I took a closer look and could see some kind of worm-like shape writhing around inside of it, trying to break its way out. I knelt down beside him and could see the blood dripping all over him. His lips started to tremble, and he tried to form my name with his mouth, but he couldn't. It just came out as a sort of mixture between a groan and a mumble. His hand twitched and reached out for me. I got up and tried to bring him with me, but he couldn't move at all. He just remained on the ground with his arm outstretched, with his hand twitching helplessly. Looking into his eyes was horrible. I could see the pain and terror inside of them. I wanted to help him. I had to help him, but I didn't know what I could do. I could hear something dropping to the floor and squelching beside me as I backed away. It was more of those sacks. They had fallen from the ceiling and spilled their vile-smelling contents everywhere. Next to where the sacks had dropped down, I noticed a sea of bones piled in the corner. Suddenly, the light from my headlamp hit something, and I caught a glimpse of what looked like pale human arms. I also saw what looked like a human torso and arms. That was no human. There were a pair of mandibles protruding from its face where its mouth should have been. It turned its face towards me, and it had no eyes, just a pair of empty sockets. It rose to its full height before me, and I saw that it had multiple segments to its body, like a centipede in human form. Each segment of its body had a pair of small legs attached that ended in claws that clicked against the ground as it moved. It towered over me and gave that same shriek from before. I tried my hardest to hold my breath and to stay as silent as possible. It darted toward Alex's body before scuttling to a different part of the cavern. I didn't know where I was just yet. It moves its face towards me at lightning speed out of nowhere, but I forced myself to hold my breath and stay still. It was inches from my face. My legs were shaking from pure exhaustion, and I knew I could not hold out much longer. Thankfully, it scuttled away once again and let out another shriek as it moved. I heard Alex scream from behind me all of a sudden. I whipped my head around to look at him, and as I did, I saw something erupt out of the egg sac on his stomach. It looked just like the huge creature I had seen, except it was smaller, a child. It shrieked loudly as it emerged, raised its head towards the ceiling, and then lunged at Alex and tore open his throat in one rapid movement. I could only watch as his blood spurted through the air. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I made a fucking run for it. I tried to follow the air current that I could feel earlier and was moving faster than I ever had before in my life. There were tons of egg sacs in the way as I made my escape, and I didn't even have the energy to leap over them. I had to listen to the disgusting sounds as I trampled them with my feet. The passage I was following led upwards to a slope that was steep, but I made my way up it as fast as I could. I ignored all the bones that I saw on my way out and just focused on running. All I could do was focus. I just didn't stop moving. Even when the passage got narrow and squeezed the air out of my lungs, I did not stop moving. I don't know how much time passed with me running and climbing in the darkness. It felt like years. After squirming through yet another part of the passage, I finally saw daylight. I had to keep reassuring myself I was actually outside, really outside, that it wasn't all just a dream, and that I was going to be rudely pulled back into that nightmare down below. I just wanted to go home to my bed, but I knew that I had to go to the police first. I didn't tell them anything about the creatures. I stuck to my story. Alex convinced me to explore this cave he found. He had an accident and hurt himself, and we got lost, and I came straight here to tell them. I told them exactly where the cave was. I told them every single little detail of my ordeal, except for the creatures. Honestly, I don't think they believed me. Alex's family certainly didn't. They called me a murderer. The investigation lasted for a lifetime, and my mental health went into the gutter. I felt like trash and human scum for every day of my life. They gave up after about 6 months. The case is still technically open, but they could not find any evidence to convict me, and they couldn't find his body either. They told me that they conducted a thorough investigation of the cave, but they must be lying. Either they're lying, or they are not telling me the whole truth about investigating that place. I think they might have sealed it up by now, but I don't know. I never went anywhere near to check. I didn't feel safe outside anymore. If you have any questions for me, X, I suppose I can answer. I don't know how much I can really tell you though. Anyone have any idea what those things could have been? Are we in any danger of them surfacing? Or do you think they can only survive down there? Either way, I think I'm going to stay a neat recluse for the rest of my life. Be in Paris. Be night keeper in subway station. 3 a.m. Listening to radio. Checking cameras and motion sensors. Motion sensor turns on. Middle of a tunnel. No other entrance than the 2 stations. No one's supposed to be there. No camera there. No other motion sensor either. Get call from other station who noticed it as well. Send groups from both stations to check it. Tunnel is a straight line. Can see the other station 300 meters in the distance. Well lit. No place to hide. No exit. Guys call me. Say they see 2 people. One of them is screaming and running towards them. See the guy on the camera meet with 2 of the agents on the edge of the platform. Looks panicked. Check motion sensor. It regularly blinks. They discuss for a minute. They tell me he's a tagger. Went in through the other station. Told them he has been attacked by a ghost. They tell me they can see the ghost in the tunnel. Ask guys from the other station. They see him too. Motion sensor is still blinking. Well, sure is a ghost. Guys from both stations enter the tunnel to catch the other guy. He is reported to run to the side of the tunnel in between lights. Motion sensor stops blinking. Watch camera. No one exiting the tunnel throughout the whole thing. No news for 2 minutes. Slight nope. Call the other station. No one seen exiting the tunnel on their end. Motion sensor starts blinking again. They've met halfway through the tunnel where the motion sensor is. Flooded the whole area with powerful flashlights. No one was found. Nope. They bring the tagger back. Call the cops. Meanwhile, talk to him. Says a shadow pursued him while screaming at him. He says he never actually screamed. Nope. Hear an electronic relay clicking. Turn around. Motion sensor is blinking. 20 plus people, along with cops, go to the tunnel. No one is found. The motion sensor was since considered to be malfunctioning. It lit again at night occasionally, but none of those that were there this night want to check it. Reposting, but authentic story. How some guy managed to disappear in a tunnel without any exit remains an enigma. I later participated in scouting the entire tunnel, searching for some hidden path. The subway interconnects with the sewers, caves of nearby buildings, and even the catacombs. It can happen in Paris that some people open new ways between different underground networks by simply destroying a wall between the two. We checked on the maps to see if there was some nearby cave. Went through the entire tunnel, checking every square centimeter for a hole. Digging the railway ballast in case it was below, but nothing was found. And the guys that were in the tunnel that night were certain there was someone. It is a perfectly straight tunnel between the two stations, so it gives a pretty clear view. Sadly, there isn't the slightest proof of anything. Cameras are too angled towards the platforms to see the tunnel. I had kept the recordings just in case, but I had never spotted anything on them, and there was no follow-up. Nothing else happened since. Not my story. Young dude, back in the 80s. 10 or 11 years old. Lives in a town like on Stranger Things. Between some of the houses is a wood, and behind it is a big house, bigger than the other houses in the area. While the rest have 2 floors, this one has 3 and looks really gothic. They know that people live in it, but no one ever sees them. Becomes a bit of a local legend, with lots of speculation about it. One day, young dude is playing alone in the woods and gets the feeling someone is watching him. Spoops and goes home. Always feels like someone is watching him, either from the house or from the woods themselves. Stays away for a few days and then goes back. Hears someone tell him, "You don't have to leave." Turns around, and there is a girl there, a few years older than him. Has a raggedy, uncombed mop top and ill-fitting clothes. Turns out she lives in the house and is homeschooled. They become friends. He asks her questions about the house because everyone is curious about it. Tells him she has the whole 3rd floor to herself, while her parents live on the other 2 floors. Never invites him inside, but he never invites her to his house neither. His parents thinks it's cute that he's made a new friend, and his sister teases him and says he has a crush on her. He says he probably did have a crush on her because she was showing him attention and asking about his life, which no one else ever did, although he didn't find her attractive. She teaches him how to smoke. He pushes her on a swing and stuff. They have fun, not that kind. Always meets her in the woods. Then one day, she's just not there, and he doesn't see her again. 6 months or so later, the spoopy house is up for sale. Begs his mom to take a look because it's an open house. She agrees. They go, and lots of people are there because it's not just the kids who are curious about the place. They speak with the owner of the house and introduce themselves, and the owner says she recognizes the young dude. Young dude gets creeped out. She shows them around the house, but only the bottom 2 floors, but he knows there's a 3rd floor, and you can even see the windows of it from the woods. Woman mentions that she had a daughter who died some years before. Young dude can see the resemblance between her and the girl that he's been hanging out with. Tells his sister about it. She says he was in love with a ghost. He doesn't believe that, but doesn't have a better explanation. Goes back to the woods. Looks up at the house and sees the girl's mom staring at him from the window. Not smiling, not waving, just glaring at him. Gets creeped out and leaves. Anyway, house is sold, and that is that. His parents get divorced a couple of years later, and he moves from the area. Years later, he is married, and at a family gathering, back in his childhood town, his sister brings up the ghost girl, He tells the whole story. Him, his wife, and sister decide to go there. Walk the same, now overgrown trail. Gets to the dilapidated swing he used to push around. Goes to the same place the cigarettes were hidden, and the old fucked pack is still hidden there. All get spooked and leave. Little while later, he is sick and having fever dreams. Has this dream he's young and back in the woods and can hear laughter. Walks the trail to find the ghost girl sitting on a bench and laughing at him. She pulls her hair off and keeps laughing at him like some maniac. Wakes up totally terrified. Realizes that the girl all those years ago wasn't a ghost. It was the girl's mom, LARPing as her dead daughter. It explained why she had such weird hair, why her clothes did not fit, how her mom recognized him during the open house tour, and how they looked so similar. Gets asked how he could mistake a grown woman for a girl a few years older than he was at the time. But kids who are 10 or 11 years old aren't exactly the smartest kids around and are easily duped. Believes she really did have a dead daughter, but she LARPed as her as a kind of cope. I got one, but it's short and anticlimactic. Here it is anyway. Be me. Go camping with some friends. Set up next to a lake in a heavily forested mountain range. First couple days and things are normal. We hike and climb the mountains and map out the area around the lake pretty well. Barely ever see anyone on the trails. Definitely the only group camping around the lake. Fourth night, and we're all sitting on the edge of the lake, near the campsite. My drunk friend took a night swim, while the rest of us sat on the shore and looked at the stars. See a small, flickering light coming from a cove in the lake. We joke about how it's probably some neurotic boomer doing 1 a.m. pike fishing. Light slowly getting brighter. Oh shit, he's coming our way. Probably gonna yell at us for being too loud and scaring the fish. Drunk friend still splashing around in the water. Light's still getting closer, but no sign of paddling or outline of boat that we can make out. I run up to the tent and grab my binos. By the time I get back, the lake is pitch black again. Everyone brushes off my concerns about aliens, saying it's just someone fishing, and our eyes probably played tricks on us, looking like he was closer than he was. Continue to sit there for a minute and see the light again, but this time it's on the trail on the mountain next to the lake. Looks like the same flickery, headlight type lamp. Light gets way brighter. They made a fire now. Grab my binos and look at the campfire. See what I can only describe as an SUV-sized vehicle, glowing bright, somewhere between neon green and neon orange. I can see it moving slightly. Glowing oval outline moving through the brush. Definitely an object, and not a flashlight or fire. Make my friends look for themselves. All agree, we don't know what the fuck it is. Dub it the glowing SUV, as we continue to sit there at the stars. Lights eventually go out. Know me friends brush it off, and we all go to bed. Nothing else happens.